people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy.
The undisputed super featherweight champion of the world, Alicia, the Bumgarner.
That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. The continued fallout of Marlen Esparza's decision loss this past weekend to Gabriela Alanis, who now reigns as that division's Ring Magazine, WBC, WBA, and WBO champion. We've got a good idea what the future might hold for Gabriela Alanis, but what will the future hold for Marlen, the former champion? What's she gonna do now? I question the status of her relationship with Golden Boy Promotions on the heels of this loss. You know, some promotional outfits, fighter loses a fight, they cut him. Was this the final fight of Marlen Esparza's existing Golden Boy Promotions deal? And was her continued time at Golden Boy contingent upon her winning this fight? Was that the situation, or will Golden Boy stand by her, stay beside her, and continue to promote her as she moves up in weight to the super flyweight division in spite of this loss? Will Golden Boy continue to promote Marlen Esparza, who I have no doubts is going to be moving up in weight in her very next fight, the next time we see her? She didn't make the weight, and she didn't make the weight for a reason for this past weekend's fight. And before that, I had heard that beyond this rematch, she wasn't planning on staying at flyweight anyway. So when she misses the weight by 2 pounds, that's what that communicates, that she had no intention of staying there beyond this weekend. Marlen Esparza, the seasoned amateur, the former champion as a professional, you could give her reasonable odds to pick up a title or titles up there at super flyweight, up there at 115 pounds, which for Marlen, given her age and her build, is a more manageable weight. More manageable than flyweight. Give her decent odds to beat Mexico's own IBF champion, Irma Garcia, Mexico's own WBC champion, Ashley Gonzalez. Decent odds. Comes to Japan's own Mizuki Hiruta. Stylistically, Mizuki could give Marlen Esparza some problems because she's an action fighter and she's a strong puncher. I saw some footage of her training right here in the US of A with Manny Robles. Don't know what the extent of that relationship is. Is Manny Robles going to be in Mizuki Hiruta's corner moving forward, or was she just trying things out? I'm not completely sure, but from what I can see, Mizuki stylistically, given her height, her length, her build, and her youth, as she progresses, that could become a very dangerous fight for Marlen Esparza. So if Marlen wants to get her in the ring, she needs to do it sooner than later. While young Mizuki is still green. There is Argentina's own unbeaten WBA champion, Clara Lescurat, who was in action in Australia not that long ago. Opposite the ring, Lynn Sandstorm. Clara successfully defended her WBA title. Clara's not a particularly big super flyweight. She's an aggressive fighter, a come-forward fighter, and a somewhat strong puncher, but in terms of physical dimensions, she's actually not that big. So it's a negotiable situation for Marlen Esparza, who in all likelihood is going to box and punch, move around, use the ring. You know what she does? Similar thought process that Clara Lescurat doesn't actually have that many professional fights. She's only 11-0. So the sooner Marlen gets her in the ring, the better. Because as she fights more often and amasses more professional experience, the assignment could become that much more difficult. Yes. You could give Marlen Esparza decent odds to pick up one or some titles at 115 pounds. The question is, how soon is she going to get back out there? When? She's still going to be with Golden Boy Promotions, or on the heels of this loss, will Golden Boy decide they're no longer in the Marlen Esparza business? Where? There are 4 champions up there at super flyweight. Which one among them would Marlen Esparza go after first? Who? Questions that need answers on the heels of what is Marlen Esparza's second professional loss. We'll see what happens. Men's super lightweight and/or welterweight news. Two-division champion Teofimo Lopez has called for a potential fight versus Ryan Garcia in September or December. It doesn't necessarily have to be at my weight class. It could be a catchweight, so we don't have any problems moving forward, accenting that Ryan didn't actually make super lightweight where initially he was contracted to. At least Devin thought he was, and at the very last minute, Ryan decided to come in 3 pounds over. What seems more and more deliberate.
Seems deliberate. It was deliberate. Ryan admitted it was deliberate. He even said Floyd told him to do that.
Teofimo Lopez, confident in his abilities, seemingly wants to skip the formality, skip the foreplay. If what Ryan wants is to compete at above 140 pounds, he can accommodate him. He can do that.
Ryan wasn't concerned about winning Devin's WBC title. I don't think he's all that concerned about winning Teofimo's WBO.
Teofimo, who said everybody got psyched from what Ryan was doing. He played it smart. He did what he did. Congratulations to him. If I'm actually happy things turn out the way that they did, with Ryan now in the mix, it just makes things much better. But it doesn't take away from what Haney has accomplished and what he's done in his lifetime. He just wanted to cash out. He sure did.
Are things better?
Would it be better for Teofimo to end up facing Ryan Garcia instead of Devin Haney? And from a fiscal perspective, from a financial perspective, I have to say yes, because Lopez versus Garcia commercially is a bigger fight, a much bigger fight than Lopez versus Haney. And Lopez versus Haney is a decent-sized fight, but with Ryan, it's bigger.
More money.
A lot more money. Now, Teofimo, he would have to acquiesce to being the B-side, even though he is, by and large, a more accomplished fighter than Ryan, with a better resume. To make the fight happen, he would have to do what Devin did, and Devin took a back seat to Ryan Garcia. He took the lower end of the split. Teofimo would have to if he's serious.
What about the fight? Is this a more winnable fight for Teofimo than the Devin Haney fight would have been?
In some ways, I think it is. Stylistically, Devin's style doesn't do Teofimo any favors because so long as he hangs back and stays behind his jab, he can continually walk Teofimo into punches. There's not much chance of Devin knocking him out because Devin, God bless him, he can't crack an egg. He's got no power, but he can hang back, move his feet, move around, use the jab, and outpoint Teofimo.
You still think that? You don't think Teofimo would knock him out?
I'm not a slave to the moment like a lot of people and all of their knee-jerk reactions to where a guy loses one fight and all of a sudden he can never win again and he was never any good. Boxing fans often go to extremes based on what happens in one fight that might not have any bearing on another. Styles make fights, and Devin's style is still all wrong for Teofimo, whereas Ryan's style is a bit more negotiable.
How did Ryan beat Devin?
The short version. Devin was trying to close the distance, and he found out repeatedly that Ryan is stronger and better on the inside than he is. But I don't think Ryan is better on the inside than Teofimo.
The shorter, stumpier fighter with the shorter arms that can put together punches faster at that proximity. On the inside, I favor Teofimo in the exchange.
I didn't see a great display of boxing from Ryan Garcia. All I saw was a solid, fully hydrated fighter who was strong and fast versus a guy who wasn't.
But in terms of fight mechanics, nuts and bolts boxing, I didn't see a great display from Ryan. He was faster, he was stronger.
We all know Devin Haney can't crack an egg, but Teofimo Lopez, he can. He has the power that Devin doesn't have, that if Ryan isn't careful, he'll be on the receiving end of it. In the pocket.
Styles make fights.
Ryan may have been better than Devin in the pocket, but I don't think he's better than Teofimo in the pocket.
That's how I see it.
Men's junior middleweight news. Some post-fight comments from Virgil Ortiz after his one-round destruction of the grossly overmatched Thomas Dulorme. Virgil said, "Hey Tim, I'm ready for you, man. Let's get ready for World War III. Let's put on the best show for these folks."
Yeah.
Adding to that via his Instagram account, young Virgil said, "I can't wait for August 8th. Are you going to come see me fight?"
It's a hell of a fight.
Some might argue that the fight between Tim Tszyu and young Virgil Ortiz is a better fight than the main event, than the Crawford versus Madrimov fight. How do I rate this fight?
4 stars.
And Crawford versus Madrimov?
3 stars.
Wait a minute. You think this fight is a better fight than Crawford versus Madrimov?
I think it's tougher to edge. I think it's a lot more intriguing. I think it's more of a pick'em fight. than Crawford versus Madrimov.
Well, if that's what you think, then why were you so against Rick Mirrigan pushing for this fight to be the main event and not the Crawford versus Madrimov fight?
It's because he's not in a position to do that.
It's because he's rocking the boat, and rocking the boat jeopardizes whether or not this fight happens. Try and understand. While I rate this fight a 4-star fight and the Crawford versus Madrimov fight a 3-star fight,
Virgil wasn't the headliner in this past weekend show, but you want him to headline in August?
make it make sense. He wasn't the headliner with Jose Ramirez on the bill, but he's going to be the headliner with Terrence Crawford on the bill.
Crawford's not going to go for that.
And I don't think Eddie Hearn is going to go for that, to have his fighter, his champion, Israel Madrimov, putting his alphabet title, his newly obtained title, on the line against a pound-for-pound elite fighter to then be demoted by one of Oscar's boys. Oscar's fighter, who isn't a champion, has never been on pay-per-view.
I don't think Terrence is going to go for that. I don't think Eddie's going to go for that.
There are other outlying factors than which fight you like more than another fight. There are other outlying factors there that make Rick Mirrigan rocking the boat and asking for more money, asking for a main event slot, not a good idea.
He's going to fuck around and kill the fight like he's killed some other fights already.
And that's why, in spite of my rating Tszyu versus Ortiz as a 4-star fight and Crawford versus Madrimov as a 3-star fight, I still don't think it's a good idea to rock the boat. I still don't think it's a good idea to make waves. Virgil likely stands to make very good money, great money, fighting on this card, which is a huge card.
Stop being greedy, Rick.
Because how many times in how many videos have I told you, a lot of the problems in the sport of boxing with getting a fight over the line begin and end with somebody wanting more money. If you let the fighters and you let the managers tell it, it always works out to where they're supposed to get more money.
Always.
We don't need Rick Mirrigan jeopardizing the fight, rocking the boat, and making waves for a few more dollars. Because if he wants a main event slot, that's why. The guys in the main event,
They get more money.
Crawford was in a successful pay-per-view last year that did robust numbers. He's riding high now, and it's not right for him to ask him to take a back seat to Virgil Ortiz or Tim Tszyu.
These Virgil Ortiz, ridiculous matchups. I'm so glad we're actually gonna see for real. Hopefully, right? Hopefully he makes it through the way into the fight. Cause once again, doesn't fight at a 154 weight limit. And it's just like, bro, they want to test his body, I heard, but yet they're not having him see if he can make the cut. I know like the last fight, they wasn't sure what weight it was gonna be until like fight week, I heard. So, I think that one was at 156 as well. This one too. Didn't learn anything from the Delorme fight, and now we're gonna go against Tim Tszyu, who's a proven 154 pounder. It's tough to know what to expect. So we all know Virgil, 21 wins, 21 knockouts. Tim Tszyu, we seen what he can do. So yeah, hopefully it's an explosive fight. Yeah, I mean, I'm rolling with Tim Tszyu. I'm gonna go with the guy that's active, the guy that's fighting top level competition, the guy making the weight.
Stout observations from that caller who called into the Boxing Voice to express his thoughts on what could be Tszyu versus Ortiz. It is true. Tim Tszyu is a lot more proven, battle-tested at this weight than Virgil Ortiz, who hasn't even made this weight. And we likely know why, because they don't want to push his body too hard so soon after his return. He's fought for a grand total of just 2 rounds in the last year and a half, and those fighters were a far cry from what he'll be facing in Tim Tszyu, and yet...
So that rhabdomyolysis thing works. You have to be careful. You can't push your body too hard or you'll cause a flare-up.
Good people at the Spit Bucket podcast asked, true or false? The damage Tim Tszyu took against Fundora will impact the fight more than any potential ring rust we'll see from Virgil Ortiz. I'd say false.
You don't think ring rust is an issue?
It's not ring rust. It's not ring rust because Virgil has fought 2 times in the last 12 months. It's not ring rust per se. It's a lack of experience. A lack of experience at this weight, a lack of experience with a fighter like this, and a lack of preparation that nobody, and I mean nobody, that Virgil Ortiz has fought so far at welterweight and beyond.
Who's the strongest puncher Virgil ever fought?
I'd have to say it was Egis Kavaliauskas down there at welterweight. A welterweight at welterweight is the strongest fighter that Virgil has ever faced, whereas Tim has comparatively faced bigger and more durable, more powerful competition than what Virgil has seen so far.
It's an experience thing.
Even with all these outlying factors, like Virgil Ortiz's rhabdomyolysis potentially flaring up as a result of finally trying to make 154 because he still hasn't, his lack of experience, that he's not actually as experienced a fighter as Tszyu, nowhere near as experienced at this weight, he hasn't faced here what Tim Tszyu has already faced here.
You still have overzealous fans.
Super fans who insist that Virgil Ortiz is going to steamroll Tim like he just steamrolled a very over-the-hill and past it Thomas Dulorme. Is Thomas Dulorme in any way, shape, or form the best the junior middleweight or middleweight division has to offer? You're telling me that because Virgil knocked him out in one round,
That's what the call is talking about.
the one who called into the boxing voice, that Virgil's last two fights were foregone conclusion fights. In truth, I'm not complaining about those fights myself. I understand them. I identify them as necessary evils. You had to ease Virgil back into activity because he was out of the ring a long while. I get it. But this is not Frederick Lawson. This is not an over-the-hill Thomas Dulorme.
Super fans.
What is any organized sport without overzealous fans and their zealotry? Super fans who insist that just because they have one or two things in common with Virgil, or maybe they hail from the same state as he does, oh, he's going to steamroll everything and everyone for no reason other than what you have in common with him.
Because that's the only reason you're saying what you're saying.
Can't have a conversation and evaluate a fight properly with somebody like that. I don't try to.
They do.
Think it's an excellent fight, and it's a great fight, but I also happen to think it's a dangerous fight for Virgil Ortiz. I do.
We have a good idea of what Virgil can give, but what can Virgil take?
What can he endure? We just saw Tszyu battle through a hard fight where the man couldn't see from all the blood pouring into his eyes, and even with that, he was able to make it competitive. Even with that gash on his head that kept bleeding into his eyes.
Sebastian couldn't drop him. Sebastian couldn't stop him. He still had to be careful.
Still had to measure his approach as to not end up on the receiving end of Tszyu's power, because he has power, proven power at these weights, whereas most of what we've seen from Virgil's power has been at welterweight.
Against welterweights and junior welterweights. I remember Mighty Mo Hooker getting off a few good shots. I remember Mean Machine being a handful.
So I would not underestimate Tszyu in this situation. This is not a two-star fight. This is not a foregone conclusion fight. And it's a little more than just a solid fight. A three-star fight.
It's a 4-star fight.
And in many ways, a pick'em fight. Where you can have faith in Virgil, you can have faith, but how much faith is it before it becomes zealotry?
Wishful thinking.
Based on what you would like to happen as opposed to what has already happened and what you need to think about.
Yeah, I don't bother with the super fans. I don't argue with them. Go with whoever you're going with for whatever reason you're going with them.
As I've always said, there is a place for tribalism in all of organized sports, but not a place for it in every conversation. Not this one. Evaluating the risks, yeah, it's a risky fight for Tim, but it's also a risky fight for Virgil, who has proven very little at this weight.